Kansas picked 9th in the preseason Big 12 poll. Is that Goldilocks just right? Is it too low? Is Kansas being screwed? I'm going to try to make the case why I think Kansas should be preseason ranked in the Big 12 poll a little bit higher.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here at D Johnson Radio on Twitter. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. On today's edition of LOJ, Kansas picked 9th in the preseason Big 12 poll. We're going to go over what that means, why it would be the case. It's not the worst spot in the world, but also could you make an argument Kansas could be higher? I certainly would, and think that they should be higher in that poll. So we'll get to all that on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks. And today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time, where you'll be able to get tickets in the fall for KU games. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Okay, so what am I talking about? Kansas being picked 9th in the Big 12 preseason poll. Brett Yormark and the Big 12 decided to do away with the coaches' preseason poll. So you might be thinking, okay, well, what are you talking about here? What preseason poll are we talking about? Well, our hosts here at Locked On decided to do a Big 12 preseason poll. And in that poll, you end up with number 1, Arizona State, number 2, Kansas State, 3, Texas Tech, 4, Baylor, 5, Iowa State, 6, BYU, 7, TCU, 8, Utah, 9, Kansas, 10, Colorado, 11, Houston, 12, Oklahoma State, 13, West Virginia, 14, Cincinnati, 15, UCF, 16 is Arizona. And I will be doing a little bit of, what other teams in the conference I think might be a little too high or a little too low coming up in a upcoming segment. Now, we also got to hear from our Locked On College Football expert, which check that out for your second listen every day, in which they did their individual preseason Big 12 rankings, and that had Kansas at 9 as well. So either one you're looking at has Kansas at 9. Now, in that one, Texas Tech against Arizona State in the Big 12 title game. And again, in the Locked On Big 12 one, we have Arizona State 1, Kansas State 2. But either way, we end up with Kansas in at number 9 in that, I guess, preseason rankings. And to be clear, you go back to last year, it really is a cluster. You could pick a team 3rd or 4th, and theoretically they could have the same record as a team in 1st. In fact, last year there was a 4-way tie for the top 2 spots in the conference. Baylor, TCU, and Texas Tech all went 6 and 3 in the conference. That technically means they finished 5th. That technically means they finished 7th in the conference. So even though finishing 7th doesn't sound great, it's 6 and 3 in conference play, which actually is pretty good. Kansas State and West Virginia tied 8th and 9th last year at 5 and 4 in conference play. So in theory, if I said Kansas is going to finish 9th in the Big 12, that could mean a 5 and 4 Big 12 season, which combined with their non-con, where you would expect them to beat Wagner, you would think they should beat Fresno State, though it's not a slam dunk. And then you have kind of a coin flip game in Missouri. That clearly is something where, okay, 5 and 4 in Big 12 play probably puts you somewhere between 6 to 8 wins and gets you to another bowl game. So that would be a successful season. That would be a good thing for Kansas. I think you could make the argument that they should be higher, though. And I understand why. I'm sure for some people, they would make the argument that they could be lower, because you look at it from a perspective of, okay, Kansas went 5 and 7 last season. They lose all this really good talent. They lose Devin Neal. They lose all their receiver production. They lose some good offensive linemen. They lose, their linebacking core, and they lose their DBs, star-studded players like Kobe Bryant and Melo Dotson. You're telling me they're going to be better than they were a season ago when they finished 10th in the Big 12 a season ago? You could understand the logical reasoning of saying, oh, they finished 10th the season ago and they have a lot of that production out, so they're going to be below that, right? But see, I could easily spin it into saying, okay, if you're high on Lance Leipold as being a good coach, which I am, I think he's a good coach, right? And if you think that the record should have been better than it was a season ago, which I think it probably should have been, you're getting a different jumping off point. I think the argument for why Kansas should be better than 9th, why they should, or why I guess they will finish better than 9th during the season, even if they're being predicted here, is that they easily could have been an 8 or a 9 win team a season ago. And so it's one thing to say, okay, the jumping off point is they finished 10th last year and they lost all these players. How could they be better? But realistically, they beat 3 ranked teams a season ago in a row. If you look at the Big 12 standings, the top 4 in the standings, we mentioned all went 7-2, right? There were 4 teams tied at 7-2 in the conference standings. BYU, Colorado, Iowa State, and Arizona State. Kansas beat 3 of them, and the other one they didn't beat, they lost by 3 on the road in a game they were leading with 2 minutes to go in Arizona State. So you look at it, Kansas very easily could have beaten all 4 of the top teams in the Big 12 a season ago. And so it's not realistic. Like when you go 1-5 in 1-score games, yes, sometimes that can be indicative of like Nebraska consistently is losing or was losing 1-score games with previous coaches that, sometimes that can be about your maybe your quarterback or about your coach or whatever. But we've seen Lance Leipold in previous seasons. In fact, the bigger sample size coming into this year was that he's about 500, slightly above 500 in 1-score games. Same with Jalon Daniels, right? And so the bigger sample would say that, okay, they're typically not going to go 1-5 in a given year in 1-score games. So realistically, last year's team was probably closer, if you're looking at it from like a power rating perspective, to being like a 7-win football team. And if that is the case, the jumping off point realistically is, okay, you're saying, are they going to be better or worse than last year, which realistically was closer to a 7-win team, where you figure, okay, maybe this year some of the luck reverts in their favor or gets ironed out to a little bit back more to the norm. And so if that's what you're saying, and you could make the argument they could have won 8 or 9 games a season ago, that inherently would put them, I think, higher than 9th in the Big 12. And again, you're talking about them beating 3 of the like if we just look at what the preseason rankings were, again, Arizona State being the preseason pick for number 1. Kansas, again, led that game on the road with 2 minutes to go. Kansas State at number 2. Kansas should have won that game in Manhattan. Heck, they should have won the game in Lawrence the year before. Number 3 is Texas Tech. They've had trouble with Texas Tech, and they obviously didn't play last year. Baylor, they have trouble with Baylor, but they don't have them on the schedule this year. Iowa State at number 5. They beat Iowa State 3 straight years. BYU, they beat them back-to-back years, including winning at BYU a season ago. TCU, they've had trouble with Utah. That'll be an interesting one. But yeah, you go through that, and you're just like, okay, this team could obviously finish better than where they are at number 9. In fact, if you're looking at the ESPN FPI, which is more of that power ranking type of system, Kansas is actually the 4th highest rated Big 12 team in the ESPN FPI coming into the season. So if you look at it from that perspective, maybe a non-objective, or I guess an objective like computer, so to speak, Kansas comes in at number 4. Now, what if we look at like roster talent to be like, okay, but this team lost all this roster talent from last year's team, so how can they actually be better? Okay, so you had Devin Neal and Bryce Cable do get drafted. Nobody else got drafted. Now, in my opinion, I think Logan Brown should have been drafted, and if not for how he left Wisconsin, maybe he would have been, right? In my opinion, Kobe Bryant should have been drafted. I don't know what happened there, if it was, interviewing with teams or what, but 2 players got drafted from Kansas. So as much as we're talking about this being like an exodus of talent, and there were really good players, and I don't want to take away from what those players did at Kansas, it's not like you're losing 5 first-round picks, right? This isn't losing the Orange Bowl where you go off losing the Orange Bowl and you're losing an All-American at tackle who's a draft pick. You're losing a first-round draft pick in Aqib Talib at corner. You're losing Derek Fine, an NFL draft pick at tight end. Like, it's not as like, I don't want to say it's replaceable, but you're not having to replace players that are first-round picks or second-round picks, which you don't always see at Kansas. That is a positive here. And so if we look at it from this perspective too, like, Kansas brought in, I don't know, 24/7 Sports does this really cool like roster talent thing every year. Kansas was 49th in that last year, 8th in the Big 12. I don't know what they're going to be this year, but if we look at just incoming recruiting classes, which is not everything nowadays with the transfer portal, that becomes a lot different. But coming into last season, Kansas's 4 recruiting classes that basically made up that team, they had 21 top 1,000 high school recruits. But if you look at the 3 older classes, so not counting the class of 2024 that were going to be true freshmen, not really make an impact that year, in the 3 previous classes, they had 12 top 1,000 recruits. Well, coming into this year, they have 17. And if you look at the bigger picture of 4 recruiting classes, it's 25. So they have more top 1,000 recruits. There's a chance their roster talent is actually better this year. When I look at the linebackers they brought in via the portal, I think they have better linebackers than they did last year. So like, even though you're losing proven production, that doesn't mean it's always better. And so you look at it and you combine that with the coaching. I think Jim Zebrowski is a big upgrade to what Kansas wants to do at the offensive coordinator position. I think DK McDonald could absolutely be an upgrade to what Brian Borland was doing at the defensive coordinator position. When you combine those, when you combine Jalon actually getting to throw in the summer to his receivers, which he's been able to do, flew him out to California and stuff. When you combine all that with the fact that actually they could have equal, if not slightly better roster talent than they did a season ago. We'll wait and see where that one comes out. When you look at maybe having better luck in one-score games, when you look at the fact that they beat the big boys last year, when you look at the fact that the Big 12 is just a crapshoot, and there's going to be a lot of close games, a lot of random things that happen, that Arizona State went from being the last projected team in the Big 12 a season ago to winning the conference and nearly beating Texas in the college football playoff. When you look at all of those things, there's a real chance that Kansas, and is why if I was, if there was a line on this on like FanDuel, for instance, of like Kansas over under 8.5 in their finishing spot in Big 12, I would be taking that they would finish better than 9th, where they're being predicted in this early preseason poll. All right, let's continue on. I want to talk about the Big 12. Who are some teams that maybe I'm higher or lower on than consensus here? Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. Get some Big 12 football tickets with Game Time. We've all been there too, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets, sports tickets to go on sale, whatever it is, only to lose your spot to a show or event that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories. Going to a live sporting game should be about making memories. You always have that one memory of that event, that comedy event, that whether it's a big upset, maybe you storm the field, and not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping, and not that stuff. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert or sports tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime or game time, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. I feel like I just said the title of the movie in the movie by saying that. Anyway, tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Game Time Zone Deals pick the best seats in the section for you. Take the guesswork out of buying concert or sports or show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget to make Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball your second listen every day. All right, so I think Kansas should be rated higher or better, whatever you want to say, than 9th in the preseason poll here from Locked On. Who would I have a bit higher or lower? So I think it's hard to not pick Arizona State as one of the top two teams. And so I think if you're viewing it on paper, I agree with that. At the same point in time, based on the parity that we see from the Big 12, I actually if I could short a stock and say Arizona State's not going to make the Big 12 title game, I would take that pick. It's, again, not that if you're viewing it from a power rating perspective, I probably would have them as a top two team in the conference coming into the year. But again, because of how weird the Big 12 is and how close a lot of these teams are and the competition is in the games, I don't think I would in this current iteration of the Big 12, it's going to be hard for me to want to pick a team to win the conference back-to-back years. I don't know. That's just something that I'm looking at. I am kind of high on Texas Tech. I mean, they've spent a lot of money to make that roster work, and I think they can this year. I am high on Baylor and what they can possibly do. I think BYU could end up being a little bit high. That obviously it's not just the Jake Retzlaff situation in terms of losing your quarterback, who's a good player, that is important, but it's also the uncertainty and the noise you have to deal with and how all of that has kind of come together. I could see TCU being a little bit better there too. Josh Hoover back. Utah, I definitely have much higher. I think Utah finishes top 4 in the conference this year. Their offensive line might be the best in the country. It's certainly in the conversation, and it's probably the best in the Big 12. They have 2 dudes as tackles who could be first-round draft picks, including one who could go in the top 5 or top 10 of the draft. So Utah going to be really good on the line of scrimmage at both ends. And now that they're moving past kind of the Cam Rising situation, where that's kind of similar to what BYU is dealing with, where they've had to, and obviously now they know they don't have to deal with it, but BYU this offseason had to deal with, is he going to play? Is he not? And that's kind of what they had to deal with Utah last year with Rising, just due to injury, kind of a different circumstance. That can kind of hang over a team. I think Utah is going to finish top 4, if not be in the Big 12 title game. The Colorado one could go either way for me, coming in at 10. You could convince me that, Deion Sanders has the talent. They're going to get a top 8 finish, top half finish in the Big 12 again. You could also convince me they're going to finish bottom 4 this year. So that's kind of one that I'm going back and forth. Houston is one I'm probably a little bit higher on than 11th. I don't know that I see them cracking like the top 6, but I could see them in that 7 to 10 range being a bowl team. I really like what Willie Fritz does specifically. And then you're looking at kind of the bottom teams where it's like, okay, if you told me that somebody is going to pull in Arizona State, being one of the bottom 4 teams, they were obviously the bottom, but the bottom 4 teams, which we had it picked as a Locked On Big 12 group as West Virginia, Cincinnati, UCF, and Arizona, which of those 4 teams has the best chance to pull in Arizona State last year and make it up to the Big 12 title game? So I always kind of look at UCF from a standpoint of like, you have that talent base in Florida. Could you break out? I don't know that I would be buying that with Scott Frost. I kind of like what Rich Rod is cooking at West Virginia, but that might take a year or two to fully transition. Obviously, it's a little easier with the portal nowadays, but to that system, that scheme they want to run, I do think they'll be feisty this year. But Cincinnati might be the one that I'd be like, okay, I think they could pull a big upset here, right? And I think their quarterback is certainly underrated. I think they're a very interesting team. I know Oklahoma State just misses out on that, but like that's one of those two where it's like sink or swim. With Mike Gundy, you could convince me, he consistently has been one of the best coaches in the Big 12, that Oklahoma State could finish in the top 4 of the conference. You could also convince me that last year was the bottoming out and that it is starting to be the farewell, so to speak, of Mike Gundy, and that this year they're going to bottom out again, and then they're going to make a coaching change. So those are the ones. So I guess to recap there, the teams that I'm a lot higher on than I think the consensus, Utah would be the biggest one. Mildly higher, I guess you could say. I don't know. Baylor being 4th, like if I have them in the Big 12 title game, it's 2nd. That's not like a huge jump. I guess Houston would be mildly higher, and then Cincinnati would be the other one. I guess being how the show's gone, Kansas would be the other one, obviously. And then teams I'm mildly lower on than the consensus, I think BYU would be one of them. Colorado would probably be one of them. Oklahoma State might be the other one. But I do think that the beauty of this is that twofold. One, you could wind up in a situation where, the team who's picked 8th is tied 5th, but there's 4 teams tied. So technically they're 8. So it's almost better to do this in a tier. Like I almost wish we could vote this as tiers. Like who's the tier 1 teams? And maybe we define that as, okay, tier 1 teams are the 2 teams you think are going to play in the Big 12 title game. And if that was the situation, like my pick right now, I guess I'd go with Utah and either Texas Tech or Baylor. And then if you did tier 2 is like the next wave, you can kind of define that however you want. I'd probably have like Arizona State, K-State, whichever one not of Texas Tech or Baylor in that. I guess you'd have to give the love to, I don't know. Do I have to give the love to Iowa State? They lost their receivers and stuff. And then tier 3 would be, probably like Iowa State, Kansas, TCU. Maybe I'd put Houston in there. So I don't know. I think tiering would be interesting because you are going to end up with a lot of spots in the conference that are tied, and that really 5th is the same as 7th in a lot of ways, or like 9th is the same as 12th because these teams are tied and have the same record in conference play. But that's how I see the Big 12, and that's how I see the Big 12 preseason poll. All right, latest news and more. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks again for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks, and we'll have some more content coming at you throughout the week. Lucas Skorich deep dive. There was kind of another social media thing about, Kansas maybe having some interest in Skorich. Now, is that old? Is it new? I don't know. Waits to be seen, but we'll be having a conversation about that. Also going to be having a KU basketball conversation about could this Kansas team be kind of a souped-up version of last year's Michigan State team. We'll get to strengths and weaknesses of the KU basketball roster, plenty more KU football content coming at you this offseason, including early schedule or team previews of some of the teams that are going to be playing, positional previews for the different positions that KU has. And again, don't forget to check out Locked On College Football, who's talking all things college football, Locked On Big 12 to get your Big 12 pulse, and the Locked On College Basketball to, make sure you're keeping an eye on what's going on around the country with those different sports. The Rock Chalk Roundball Classic concluded this weekend, and I did want to mention again, like if the cause, if you went and the cause touched you in some way or you want to learn more, rockchalkroundballclassic.com. You can donate there. You can learn more about the cause for next year, but highly recommend doing that, rockchalkroundballclassic.com. gmail.com. I also wanted to mention again, we have our trivia event coming up, which is, I guess if you're listening to this on Monday, it would be 2 weeks from yesterday. So July 27th, that is a Sunday, July 27th at the Johnny's Tavern in West Lawrence. That's the one that's, I guess, over on 6th and Wakarusa would be the crossing streets there. So the Johnny's Tavern over there, we're going to have kind of the side back room, whatever you want to call it. If you've ever been for like Hawk Talk, that's where they do it. We're going to be over there. We've got a bunch of teams registered for that. You can have teams up to 6 people. There is an entry fee involved, but all of the entry fee, literally 100% of the entry fee, goes to the prize pool and prizes. I'm not taking a cent of it. So it's going to that, and it's going to make it fun. It's a SmackDown situation where there's some cool little intricacies over the course of the game. Again, you can have a team up to 6. You might be like mild on it, and you'd be like, that's the beauty of the team thing too. Like if you get a question wrong, you can just blame your teammate. Like nobody's going to question your logic. You can be like, oh, I knew the answer, but he messed it up. But if you have a ringer, like great for you. And we're also going to have like gift cards and apparel that we're going to be giving away over the course of the event. So like you might finish in 8th place, but like if you hit a bonus question that you just happened to get, or like you answered, something fun, like you might end up with some Johnny's gift cards along the way. So highly recommend doing it. It's all KU basketball trivia. It's a ton of fun. We did it last year too, and it's going to be even more fun this year. The categories are awesome, ready to go. We're not giving you a bunch of 1950s questions or something like that. Like we try to make it a little bit more modern. Sure, there could be some questions in there from the 1980s to throw some stuff on there, but I don't want to make any promises on what questions are or not. But point being, it's going to be a lot of fun. So register for that, jayhawktrivia@gmail.com. And again, that's going on Sunday, July 27th at Johnny's West. You can also hit me up on Twitter @DJohnsonRadio. I've got some information about it on there on how to get registered, where to reach out to, and all that fun jazz. So make sure to do that as well. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. We'll see you next time for another edition of Locked On Jayhawks.